Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me this afternoon for Morning Manna. Uh, it's a title. I'm used to it. It works for me, and thanks for your patience with it and understanding. It's a beautiful fall day, and just what a glorious time each day it is to know that the Lord is with us. He's good to us. This weekend, I saw through the World Wide Web that there is a get together to celebrate a birth date of a dear brother who I've not seen, in a year or maybe a little longer than that, but here in Newburgh. And I love this brother. He's been a great example to me, though I've lost a little bit of touch with him. That happens. But I'll reveal him in just a moment to you. In the second letter to the Thessalonians, Thessalonians 3, verse 9. The Apostle Paul, in that paragraph there, concludes that we don't have authority, but to make ourselves an example of how you should follow us. Without a doubt, the one flawless example is that of Jesus Christ. And yet, the Apostle Paul, who considers himself the chiefest of sinners, so he has no lofty view of himself as he looks in the mirror. And yet, somehow, in this tension, he considered himself an example, not of perfection, but of what it looks like to be a believer. And though I am no longer what I would classify young, there are those who are still around, like a brother I'm going to refer to in a moment, who are ahead of us, just chronologically. The Lord allowed them to be birthed on this earth before us, and has a different plan for them than he does for each one of us individually, of course. And yet they're an example, just like the Apostle Paul. Oh, now I want to bring this into the practicality of a brother I look up to much, and a fellow who I've had the privilege of knowing the last several years, though lost track, not track entirely, but because of COVID, which we all understand, things happen, things get separated and so forth. But I met Glen, and I'm talking about a dear brother, Glen Merriman. And if you've been a part of the church, you know Glen, unless you're quite recent in joining us. But Glen was, for a number of years, a real pillar in the church. And I loved hearing stories about Glen. I'll just review a little bit. The first time that I met Glen was with his wife and his kids as an elderly man then at that point. But then getting to know him better, he returned home with his family and so forth, his wife and so forth. But then while visiting up here, his beloved went to be with the Lord unexpectedly. And that's when Glen and I became very much acquainted. From that visit in the hospital, amongst the exodus of his wife to heaven. And Glen and I became good friends after that. And Glen is a seasoned pastor, not gaining all the notoriety. Oh, he pastored in the Jesus movement. He was pastoring back then with all the hippies, though he wasn't a hippie, but he was leading those young people with his wife. So I've heard story after story there throughout California. And this fella had a dynamic with his wife, a teamwork approach to pastoring a flock of people and various flocks as assigned to by the church, and welcoming kids, dropouts of society into their home, and just quietly plugging away, faithfully plugging away, working sometimes while pastoring, working vocationally, and not making a big splash, but being faithful to his call, faithful to his God, faithful to his family. What a great example. When I met Glen, he had retired from, quote, the vocational ministry. And you know what? He was just delighted to greet people at the door of the school. The biggest smile. Glen is a tall man, naturally has a tall structure and a big smile. And he'd stoop low and grin into those children's eyes and welcome them and their parents He and Rick Sanchez, who greeted before him, and Chad Opitz now, who follows suit. We just have wonderful men who are greeting and helping folks come in as the gathering together. It's a delight. But Glenn, who was a seasoned veteran minister, I knew he was praying for me. I could seek his counsel anytime I wanted. He did push it on me as a younger pastor than him. But I knew he was praying. He was always encouraging. What a gift. What an example. A real example for me. And then he went on to take the helm of Love Inc. for a while. Isn't that something? Those are tough challenges for a young man, a young woman, a middle-aged man, a middle-aged woman. And there's Glenn. Heath Playchek felt a call to move to the other side of America. Heath and his wife and family. And Glenn accepted the invitation to run the local Love Inc. for a while. Just a labor hard at that. And what an example there. Never retiring, always available, whether to greet people at a door or to jump back in full steam ahead. And then COVID came. And as you know, as we all know, that kind of made things difficult. Glenn kindly let me know that it was just too difficult to come out to the barn with the uneven gravel and the various peculiarities that outside in Oregon throughout the year meeting time has. Understandable. I get that. But he stays in fellowship. He's faithful to the fellowship. He didn't forsake the gathering together. I've tracked with him. He's involved in other local churches that are a bit more accommodating during the winter months and the rainy season, particularly for one who's a bit older. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Glenn. I don't know if you're listening to this. I don't know if you'll hear this ever, but I use Glenn literally. Thank you, Glenn. But also those senior saints, which I find myself now coming into your category, however that works. But I'm thankful for you. Thank you for you who've gone ahead and are just being faithful to pray, to be in fellowship when and where you can be, and to be opening the word, to be greeting folks, maybe at the door or maybe just sitting next to them, but encouraging those who are younger or peers to keep going. Keep going, leaving us an example. How glorious is that? Unless we get too puffed up, I'm thinking of the saints. I've had the privilege of pastoring a number of people who are older than myself, and it's a joy. Love the younger folks, but there's a seasoning, don't know how to describe it, amongst those who've got a few years or even decades under their belt. That's just rich. Thanks for your example. Thanks for your example of faithfulness. I could list names, but I'll just say Glenn, and I'll use that figuratively for the rest of you and us to keep going. Keep going. Finish the race. Fight the fight. Keep going. We need you. We love you. We're thankful for you. Thank you for your example. Though we're all chief sinners, just like the Apostle Paul, there's only one sinless one, Jesus Christ, and may he be magnified in our lives. Maranatha, God bless you. Let the Lord be magnified. Amen.